I'm Noah. I'm 29, and this is the story of how I finally stopped being the family investment. For as long as I can remember, my parents have had this unspoken rule: you only matter if you're useful, not kind, not supportive, just useful. Growing up, that meant taking on whatever role they needed: babysitter, bookkeeper, janitor. And eventually, when my dad's back gave out and my mom decided she was too burnt out to deal with clients anymore, I became the full-time operator of their family business. Not co-owner, not partner, just the unpaid workhorse with a smile. It started small. Noah, can you update the invoices this weekend? Hey, can you answer a few calls while we're in Palm Springs? That turned into, we've decided to extend our vacation. Can you handle payroll this month? And by the time I was 24, they were living in Cabo for half the year, and I was managing every client, every email, every quarterly report. They told people they were semi-retired. They told me it was a great opportunity, that I was earning my future, that all of this would be mine someday. Except, it wasn't. When I tried to bring up the idea of getting paid, Mom would pivot. We're housing you, aren't we? They let me live in the basement, where the ceiling leaked every spring. When I asked about putting my name on the LLC paperwork, Dad said I needed to prove I could handle the responsibility. After 4 years of running the business solo, I asked about a share of the profits. Mom smiled and said, "You're not motivated by money, right? You're better than that." It wasn't just the business. It was everything. They expected me to take care of repairs around the house, shuttle my sister's kids to and from school, file my brother's taxes, and pick up the slack wherever they dropped the ball. I missed my own college graduation because my parents had booked a last-minute flight to Costa Rica, and someone had to be at the office. I told myself it was temporary, that this would pay off in the long run, that being useful meant being loved. But then Christmas happened. They had planned this big family dinner, lavish as always. My brother, Caleb, flew in from Chicago. My sister brought her third husband. I handled most of the setup, decorated the house, prepped the food with Mom, made sure the driveway was plowed. By now, I'd stopped expecting thanks. I just did it. Dinner started out civil. Wine flowed, stories were shared, and Caleb talked about how exhausted he was from his new startup, a startup Dad had funded with a $70,000 gift a year prior. No one mentioned the fact that I was the one keeping the family business afloat. No one asked how I was doing. And then Mom said it. It came out of nowhere, between bites of honey-glazed ham. She laughed, looked straight at me across the table, and said, "You're almost 30, Noah. It's time to stop leeching." The whole room went quiet. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. Then I waited for her to add a punchline, some kind of joke. But there wasn't one. She just moved on, pouring herself another glass of wine like she hadn't just sucker-punched me in front of the entire family. Caleb chuckled. "Maybe he's hoping for an inheritance," he muttered, not even looking at me. I didn't speak. Not during the rest of dinner. Not during presents. I just sat there, stunned. Stunned at how little they thought of me. How easy it was for them to paint me as the burden when I'd practically given up my 20s for them. Later that night, I was scrolling through my phone in the basement, still in a fog, when a new post from my mom popped up on Instagram. A photo of Caleb outside, grinning beside a brand new Tesla, big red bow on top. "For always being there," the caption read. Always being there? My hands were shaking. I wasn't angry. I was numb. Because in that moment, everything finally clicked. They didn't just fail to appreciate me, they actively resented me. Because I'd made myself too convenient, too dependable, too invisible. That's when I made the decision. I walked upstairs, silent, past the leftover pie and the empty wine glasses. I stepped into Dad's office and turned on the desk lamp. Then I opened the drawer where I'd stashed a flash drive 6 months earlier, just in case. Back when I started quietly preparing for a future they never intended to give me. I logged into the company's systems, admin access, all under my name. Over the next 3 hours, I rerouted every operational account, revoked their logins, transferred ownership of the website, updated the banking information, and ensured every document filed with the state listed me as the sole owner and managing member. I didn't steal anything. I took back what was already mine. When I was done, I placed the flash drive neatly in the middle of Dad's desk. It contained everything they'd need: client rosters, account summaries, standard operating procedures. A parting gift. On the front of the drive, I'd written 3 words in Sharpie: "Good luck without me." Then I packed. Just one suitcase. The essentials. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't make a scene. I just left. quietly, deliberately. By morning, I was 6 hours away in a rental apartment near the coast, sipping coffee and watching the tide roll in. I turned off my phone after the fifth missed call, and I didn't look back. The first voicemail came in at 7:12 a.m. It was my mom. Her voice was unusually calm, like she was trying to maintain control for an audience. "Noah, sweetheart, I think there's some sort of technical issue. Dad can't log into the QuickBooks, and the main website says access denied. Can you call us back when you see this?" The second came 15 minutes later. Dad this time. Not calm. Furious. "Noah, what did you do? I can't get into the business account. I just spoke to Peterson. He says the vendor logins are bouncing. I swear to God, if this is some kind of tantrum because of last night." Click. The third voicemail, still Dad, came less than an hour later. Only this time, his voice cracked. "You think this is funny? You think this is revenge? We built this for you. For your future. You owe us." I didn't answer any of them. I sat on the small balcony of my Airbnb, watching waves roll over the sand, laptop open on my lap, and typed out one email. A short, professional message to the top 10 clients letting them know that effective immediately, I was the sole point of contact and managing partner. No drama. No slander. Just facts. The responses started rolling in within the hour. Most of them weren't surprised. A few congratulated me. One even said, "About time." It wasn't until noon that I finally checked social media again, and there it was. A public Facebook post from Mom. "It's always heartbreaking when your own child turns on you. After everything we sacrificed, after everything we gave, you think you know someone." No names. No context. Just vague enough to play the victim. But the comments were gold. Aunt Marla. "Wait, isn't Noah the one who's been running the business? Uncle Greg. Wasn't he living in your basement handling everything while y'all were on vacation last month?" A high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years commented, "Wow, you guys really guilt-tripped the golden goose." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Watching them lose control of the narrative was enough. By the next day, they were spiraling. The calls turned into texts. The texts turned into emails. First, denial. "We can fix this." Then guilt. "Your father's blood pressure's been up since you left." Then threats. "This is our company, and we'll take legal action." They wouldn't. And they knew it. Everything was clean. Documented. All the paper trails led back to me. I'd made sure of it months ago, when I started noticing how Mom was slowly trying to loop Caleb into certain bank accounts, just in case I ever got too demanding. I knew my parents. They never acted out of impulse. Everything was calculation. And I wasn't going to be the fool who waited around for another promise they wouldn't keep. The tipping point came 3 days later. Caleb messaged me. Not a call. Just a casual, smug little text. "Mom and Dad say you've been overreacting. They want to talk. Let's be adults about this." Then, also, FYI, they're thinking about selling the business now. Said I might oversee it. So we should probably coordinate a handoff. I laughed out loud. Actually laughed. This man, who hadn't answered a single client call in his life, who couldn't even remember his own password to TurboTax, wanted to coordinate a handoff. Like I was just a disgruntled temp holding the clipboard. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the system and terminated every remaining shadow login, locked down the servers, rerouted the business email through a new, secure hosting platform, and added a final firewall layer, one that would flag any unfamiliar IP trying to access key files. Just in case. The flash drive I'd left was outdated within 72 hours. What hit hardest, I think, was the silence after that. No more messages. No calls. No social media tantrums. Just quiet. A hollow kind of quiet. I'd expected rage. Maybe even begging. But I underestimated just how much of their identity, how much of their stability, depended on me being in the background, quietly propping everything up. Once I stopped playing the part, the show collapsed. And they didn't know how to perform without a stagehand. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with anxiety about missed invoices or juggling 10 roles just to earn a sliver of validation. I wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting off passive-aggressive guilt trips disguised as family bonding. I went for a walk that night. No destination. Just the smell of the ocean and the sound of wind in the palms. And I realized something. Maybe they did build something for me. But not the future they claimed. Not the life they dangled like a carrot. They built something better, Without even meaning to, they built the resentment I needed to finally walk away. And the story's not over yet. 2 weeks passed. I thought the silence would settle something in me, bring peace. But that's not what it did. It clarified. Because once the noise of their demands stopped, once the emails stopped flooding in, once the phone stopped buzzing with urgent family tasks, there was space to think. Not just think, feel. And what hit me hardest wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief over time I wouldn't get back. Over holidays spent managing spreadsheets instead of making memories. Over the diploma that still sat in a box in my closet because no one came to the ceremony. Over all the times I told myself, this is temporary, just to survive one more guilt trip. I'd built their business. Missed birthdays. Skipped dating. Skipped living. And for what? A Tesla with a bow on it and a caption about Caleb always being there. That line haunted me. Always being there. I had always been there. When the roof leaked and Dad was overseas on a conference, I climbed it in a storm to tarp it. When Mom forgot her client presentation in the Bahamas, I stayed up all night recreating the slide deck. When Caleb forgot to register his business name, I drove across town to file the paperwork under his LLC, my own name never once on a single document. But that didn't count. What counted was appearance. What counted was whoever made them look good on Facebook. Whoever showed up for the photo ops. Whoever said yes without asking for anything back. And that had never been me. Because I didn't know how to play the part. I only knew how to work. How to stay useful. That's the only version of love they taught me to expect. I had no intention of speaking to any of them again. Not for a long time. But life doesn't always ask for your consent. Sometimes it just shows up at your front door. Literally. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard the knock. I'd moved out of the Airbnb and into a small condo closer to town by then, quiet, simple, mine. I was mid-call with a client when I glanced through the peephole. It was my sister, Evelyn. I froze. We hadn't talked in almost a year, not really. She'd sent me a happy birthday text back in July, but it was the generic kind, the kind you copy-paste between meetings. I wasn't mad at her, but we were never close. She'd always picked her spots carefully, staying just enough on everyone's good side without ever getting in the middle. Now she was at my door. I let the call go to voicemail and opened it slowly. She looked frazzled, hair tied back in a loose knot, circles under her eyes, wearing that same Patagonia jacket she'd had since college. I didn't say anything, just waited. She cleared her throat. Hey, I didn't know where else to go. I didn't move. I wasn't sure what she wanted. An update? A lecture? Please call Mom? Instead, she handed me an envelope. I found this in Dad's drawer, she said softly. Figured you should see it. I didn't take it. Not yet. What is it? She hesitated. A loan agreement. In your name. For the business. I blinked. What? Evelyn nodded. They filed it a few years ago. Faked your signature. Used it to take out a line of credit under your name. It's not small. My stomach dropped. I snatched the envelope and opened it. Inside were photocopies, 3 documents, a $70,000 credit line from a private lender, taken out 4 years ago. My name signed in familiar but slightly off handwriting. And tucked in the back, a canceled check from the same fund. Made out to Caleb. I sat down slowly. They hadn't just used me. They'd debt-trapped me. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I could barely speak. My brain was doing the math. Interest. Term length. When the payments were due. What they were counting on that I'd never find out until it was too late. That I'd just keep working. Keep being useful. Until the debt was quietly paid off, and I never even realized it existed. That's why Dad got so quiet after I left. That's why Mom suddenly started playing the victim online. They weren't panicking because I took the business. They were panicking because they still needed me to pay their debt. I looked up at Evelyn. Did you tell them you came here? She shook her head. No, and I won't. I studied her for a moment, then asked the one question I'd been avoiding since the second I walked out. Why are you really here? Her eyes filled. And this time, she didn't hide it. Because I'm tired too, Noah. And just like that, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It had company. I didn't forgive her. Not in that moment. But I also didn't send her away. Because now I wasn't just dealing with betrayal, I was dealing with evidence. With leverage. And maybe, just maybe, with the first real ally I'd ever had in that house. And that's where it gets complicated. I didn't sleep that night. The loan document sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. The more I read it, the more furious I became, not just at the amount, But at the audacity, they'd forged my signature, used my name, my credit, my future, all while preaching about sacrifice and throwing Tesla keys to Caleb like candy at a parade. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It was strategy. They knew exactly what they were doing. And now they were stuck. Because I'd taken the business, and the business was the only income stream they had left. That loan? I was technically responsible. If I did nothing, the lenders would come after me. If I went to court, they might get away with it by claiming I'd agreed to it years ago. My parents had always been masters of twisting the truth. But this time, I had evidence. And I had something better than revenge. Control. The next morning, I sat across from Evelyn on my tiny balcony. She looked nervous, still wringing her hands, like she half expected me to yell or throw her out. I didn't. I handed her a mug of black coffee and spoke without raising my voice. I'm going to the lawyer today. She nodded. Do you want me to come? Not yet. But I will ask for a written statement from you. What you found, where you found it, and what you know. She nodded again. Okay. And Evelyn? She looked up. If I do this, there's no halfway. You understand that? I do. She hesitated, then added, they did the same thing to me. Smaller scale. A joint credit card they opened when I was in college. I didn't know until my mortgage application got flagged. My jaw tightened. Of course they did. I met with a lawyer that afternoon, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Deirdre who'd been recommended by one of my old clients. She read the documents, asked a few curt questions, and then said, this is bank fraud. We can sue. We can press charges. It's going to be messy, but winnable. Will it protect my credit? If we're aggressive and fast, you'll need to lock your report down and initiate a fraud investigation immediately. It's going to involve paperwork, depositions, likely a civil case on top of the criminal complaint. And what happens to them? Deirdre's mouth twitched slightly. If the lender decides to pursue charges, they'll be facing felony-level penalties. Prison, depending on how they forge the documents. At the very least, massive financial restitution. I exhaled slowly. I didn't want to send my parents to prison. I didn't want any of this. But I also didn't want to live with the weight of their consequences on my back. I didn't want to spend the next 10 years rebuilding a credit score I never damaged. And I sure didn't want them walking away, hands clean, while I paid for their choices. So I gave Deirdre the green light. The dominoes fell fast. I filed the fraud report. Deirdre sent an official cease and desist to the lender, along with a declaration of forged consent. Evelyn signed an affidavit. By the end of the week, a financial forensics team confirmed the discrepancies in the signature, 3 key points that didn't match any of my legal records. Then Deirdre filed the lawsuit. The moment it went public, the masks came off. Mom called first. Not crying, not begging, screaming. How dare you air this in public? Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family? I put her on speaker and calmly read the statute she'd violated. Forgery with intent to defraud a financial institution, Penal Code 134.3. Carrying a maximum of 10 years and a $100,000 fine. I can send you the PDF. You think this makes you look good? She hissed. Noah, you're tearing this family apart. No, Mom, I said. You did that the moment you used my name like a doormat. She hung up. Caleb called next. His approach was slicker. Fake friendly. Hey, bro, I think we just need to talk this out, you know? Clear the air. Sure. Let's talk about that canceled check in your name from the fraudulent loan. Dead silence. Then he said, I didn't know. They just gave it to me. And you didn't think to ask where 70 grand came from? Click. Dad never called. Instead, he posted a cryptic status on Facebook about betrayal and greedy children. The usual victim spin. Except this time, it didn't land. People weren't buying it anymore. Too many knew the truth. Too many remembered how long I'd been the backbone of their so-called empire. Within 2 weeks, they received the formal summons. I don't know what they said to each other in private. I don't know how they tried to spin it behind closed doors. But I do know that their lawyer reached out with an offer, dropped the charges, and they'd sign over the remaining business assets, issue a formal apology, and pay full restitution, including compensation for the interest damage to my credit report. Deirdre asked me what I wanted to do. And for the first time in my life, I took my time deciding. I thought about pressing charges. Thought about watching them stand in court and finally face something they couldn't manipulate. But then I realized I didn't need that anymore. I already won. I owned the business, had full custody of my future. Their social circle had turned cold. The golden child, Caleb, was now a liability. And Evelyn, who'd spent most of her life tiptoeing, was finally speaking freely, telling her own friends what she'd been through. The web they spun was unraveling from every thread. So I settled, not out of mercy, out of power. The agreement was airtight. They repaid the full amount of the loan, transferred the house deed, yes, even the house I once lived in that they claimed was theirs, and signed a legally binding statement acknowledging the forgery, which would protect me from future claims or retaliation. I gave copies to Deirdre, to Evelyn, and to a digital lockbox in case anything happened down the line. Then I blocked them, not with drama, not with a final email, just silence. Because I finally understood something they never taught me. Love isn't loyalty without boundaries. Love isn't sacrifice without return. Love isn't staying just because someone says you owe them. A few months later, on my 30th birthday, I sat on the patio of a little cafe by the water, drinking coffee with Evelyn and two friends from college I'd finally reconnected with. Someone asked how I was celebrating. I smiled, reached into my bag, and handed them each a small envelope. Inside was an invite. Grand opening, coastal strategies and solutions. A new kind of business, built from the ashes of the old. Fully mine. They laughed, cheered, and one of them toasted to clean slates. I didn't reply. I just smiled and looked out at the sea. Because I knew in my bones that I wasn't just turning 30. I was finally free.